Welcome everyone to the new platformer video episode 3. We will be in this video doing some more advanced things. As you can see here to the left, I have lives. I only have one life by default. I can change that in code. I also have my current score, which is 100 because I killed someone, which was over here. And notice that I have a little different level too. I made it a little bit more interesting. Now if I finish, I also restart my level to a new level. I also get some points. Let me finish this level as well, or maybe be killed. When I'm killed now, my score is stored in this leaderboard that we are also going to implement in this video. This leaderboard is maintained through sessions, so I can close and reopen my Godot session and my leaderboard is still there, as you can see. It only appears when I die, and I can just try it over and try to be better than last time. So this video is a little bit large because of all the concepts that I'm going to go through. I hope you guys stick with me and enjoy it. Let's do it. So the first thing that we will do is to animate a little bit on the enemy position. So let's just make this enemy a little bit more interesting and make it basically go left to right a little bit and try to kill the player. To start off then, we'll go to the enemy script back here in the enemy. Notice again, we are using a rigid body for the enemy, which means that we will not be able to change the position of the body the same way we have been doing for the player character. So if you come here to the main character, GD, the way that we are changing its position is using this move and slide. But move and slide is more specific to a kinematic body. Rigid body is different. There are several possibilities to solve this issue. One, of course, is just to change this back to kinematic body, use change type kinematic body, and do the same thing that we have been doing in the player, using also move and slide. But that's boring because we already did that, so let's do it in a different way. Another way is to use this mode in rigid body and change it to kinematic, which basically means now that this body is now a kinematic body, but I'm also able to change back to rigid on the fly if I want in my game. So say I'm currently a kinematic body, and if something happens now I want to be a rigid body, something like that, which is a little bit more interesting, but also less interesting than what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you how to actually use rigid body 2D in specific without changing to kinematic body and make still the character move around and also be physics enabled. So going to the script, just so you guys have a notion more or less of what a rigid body is and is capable of. Here in ready, I can do some physics enabled functions. For example, if I go to the rigid body in help search and go to rigid body, I can also just control click over here. We'll go to the same page. The description will say how to actually use the rigid body, and here in the note you'll notice that you should not change rigid body's position and linear velocity every frame or even very often. So this is the recommendation that that Godot themselves actually gives us, not to change it. They prefer for us to use different kinds of functions and parameters. In specific, if you come here to the methods, if we can use these add central force, force, torque, central impulse, blah, blah, blah. If you know physics, you'll probably recognize a lot of these terms. Let's try this add central force, for example, just to try things out. Here, just copy from here, go back to my enemy GD, and say in my ready, I will add a central force, which basically means add a force in the central position of my character, or in this case, in my enemy. I will send, say, a force backwards in the X direction and also up. So it should make the enemy kind of jump towards me. Let's run and see what happens. And you can see it's kind of weird, right? And the reason this is kind of weird is because a force is a constant force. So this means that now there is a constant force being applied to the enemy going up, so against gravity, this is why it's not falling down, and to the left, which is why it's now stuck to the wall. If I change the force to impulse, now the force will be done only once and stop afterwards. And instead of add, the impulse is apply for whatever reason. So we use this, now we have to stop the currently running project, and now we have apply central impulse. This means that the enemy had the force applied only in the beginning, and then the force stopped being applied. So that's why it basically just made a little arc, kind of. Like it started over here, did something like this. This is wonderful if you want to make a very physics-enabled character in which he basically can be thrown around by your player or by other things in the scene. What I want right now actually is to make this character just move left and right in a timely manner, let's say. So instead of doing this, I'll do something else that also my documentation say. If you need to directly affect the body state, which is what we want to do, change the position, use interrogate forces, which allows you to directly access the physics state. So what we will do is just copy this, go back to my code. I will create a function like this. Notice that this function is virtual, which means that I can override and Godot will call my overwritten method instead of its own. Ready, if you also take a look, is also a virtual function, and this is why Godot can call our own function from our script. This is important, and you may find some bugs in the future because you didn't notice that. And now this state will have the current state of our body. If I control click here, I can come to the definition of what this direct body state is, and it will contain many of the information regarding the physics of the object. And in specific, the one that we are interested in is this transform one. The transform will contain the specific position and rotation of the object, and it's of type transform 2D. If I click here, I can see what's inside, and you can go through also the documentation to check what are the specifics of it. What we are going to use from it is actually this translated. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going into the specifics of the physics enabled object and translating it myself. That's basically what I'm doing. So coming back to the enemy, I can then say state dot transform dot translated. So this will allow us to translate the transform by, say, vector 2, and I can say I'm moving to the left, and just that, something like this. And now I actually didn't change the transform. I need to associate the transform with this new transform. If I do this, like, generates a new transform and not associates and replaces what my transform is. So I need this. Once I'm actually with this code, you'll notice that my character instantly dies because of the enemy just jumps over me. This is funny. So we can see that this runs fairly often. I don't actually want to move that far, so I'm only moving a little bit. So now you can see it still fell because of my gravity, but at the same time it was translating to the left. I can also do the same to the right. Oops, 11, I think it's too much. So yeah, we'll basically clip through the wall. And started out because of this impulse going to the left, if you remember, and now it's going to the right. Let's just remove this impulse. Pass, make sure it's not running anything, and we can see it's moving to the right. Now the change that we will do is we'll add two things. One, a check if the enemy hits a wall. If it hits the wall, I want it to turn around and come the other side, the other way. And the second check is if I walked for some seconds to one way, I want to turn around and move the other way. So let's do the timed one. First, I will need, say, a variable with a direction. And let's say my direction starts out being -1 in the x. So if I do this, my direction will start out going to the left. And it's coming to the left. Now, after some time, I want it to turn and start going to the right. So transform this into 1. This timing feature, there are also several ways you can do this, but the easiest way is to use a node called timer. You can add a node called timer, and this timer node we will be able to use as a timer, as the name suggests. So once again, we'll use the onReady and get the timer like this. Now we are able to do two things. First, start the timer over here, say timer start, and it requires how much time should I actually wait. I will create a new variable here, duration, and I'll say it should be 3 seconds each. So after 3 seconds, what the timer will do is call a signal called timeout. So I'll override it, make sure it's here in my rigid body. And once the timer times out, what I'll do is change the direction, just multiply it by -1 and start the timer once again. So with this, my timer will be changing the direction back and forward. So first to the left, then to the right, and to the left. Let's make the character a little bit faster. Something like this, maybe. Some more. 7, maybe. A little bit more still. Okay, looks good. So now it's kind of walking fairly far, and I died. I died to my little not intelligent enemy. And something else that I now need to do is to check if the enemy hits a wall. And if it hits a wall, it needs to go back. So you remember we already are checking for area entered here, and even printing out if the body is of type main character. You also notice that I am already printing out some things here. When my enemy hits a wall, it prints out this tile map at the same time. So you see, it hit something, it's printing tile map over here, and I died once again. So since we already know that we are hitting either a body or an area, or more specifically, we are hitting bodies here, what we'll do is just do something here. If I hit a body, and the body will be around me, right? I'll make my direction change, and I'll start the timer again. So you see, it basically jumped. But now we have a problem, because the ground is also a tile map, right? So instead of just checking for any collision, now we actually want to check whether this is very funny. We want to check whether my character is hitting on its sides and not anything around it. And this will be a little bit more involved, because I'm going to teach you a little trick that is required with regards to the tile map. Because right now we are just using one single tile map for everything, right? What we are going to do now is, instead of using one for everything, we'll use two. One for, say, the walls and the ceiling, and another one for the ground, so that it'll be easy for me to check if I'm hitting one tile map or the other, so that I can compare whether I'm hitting the ground here with the enemy or I'm hitting, say, the wall or something else. Notice that the same thing now will apply to the character, because If you remember, we were using this little, let me do this. We were using this little area here, collision area, to detect whether the character hits the ground. So let's get to it. First, I'll duplicate the tile map by Ctrl D. I'll call the first tile map level, maybe? And the second one will be tile map ground. Nice. So with the level selected, I will delete everything that is a ground by right-clicking. And with the ground selected, I will right-click everything else. So these around here. So notice nothing actually is changing because both of them have the same tiles. But now if I come to the level, which is the outside part, if I click here, if I delete here, like only the level has this outside part. I can also check this by making it invisible and making the ground invisible to make sure everything is as I expect. Something else that I'll do is come here to the ground, I'll go to the inspector, and where the tile set is, I'll make unique. And inside this new tile set, because now the two tile sets are different, I can go into the tile set and just say there's no non-ground in the ground, in the ground tile map. So just throw this away, this one, just to make sure I will not put a non-ground texture in a ground tile map and vice versa. So just do the same thing to the level and delete the ground one. Nice. So now the ground tile map only has the ground texture and the map level only has the map texture or a non-ground. Notice that the layers are also the same. Collision. So the layers are also the same. So if I run as is, everything will be the same. So everything works the same. The character is also hitting and doing this little thing because it's colliding with the ground. But now I will be able to check if this tile map here that he's hitting is the ground or not. There are also several ways for you to do this. One of the main ones that people use is just to check the name. So this name, tile map level, is the name of this node, as we already used names before. But here, for example, in the body where I'm printing this tile map, I can say .name, and I'll see the name of the tile map being printed out. So first it hits the tile map level, which is the one that is over here, and then it hits the ground. So now I can, if I just want to use the name, I can do this if is the tile map level. Only then do the changes in direction. So yeah, now everything is working as we expected. We'll hit over there and come back. And let's fix the timer, because this timer is actually, I actually need to stop the timer and reset it to make sure it's working properly. And all is working. I'm not sure why in my project I keep dying because of this guy. In my project, my timeout was disconnected. I don't know what happened for it to be disconnected, but yeah, I'm just reconnected. And now everything is working as I intended, because it hits there, it comes back, eventually it goes back forward. It will hit here and come back again. And it will probably kill me again if I don't do anything. Not this was on purpose. Wonderful. Now we have an enemy going back and forward. But now notice that the enemy is always looking to the right. I will do the change now to be able to allow the enemy to look to the left when it's walking to the left, and basically make it look to the place it's actually walking. What we'll do now to be able to do that is in the sprite portion of my scene, you notice that there is this flip page, which is a property, flip page. If I select true, it basically flips around. So I'll just set this property in my code when time comes. So also on ready, instead of getting the timer now, I'm getting the enemy. And this is my sprite. Maybe I should actually call this sprite and this enemy eventually, but that's fine for now. And every time that I change the direction, I'll also flip H. So I want to set it the inverse that it was before. So same thing here. Now if you run, you notice that the enemy correctly looks to the place that it's actually looking to, or walking to. Running? Not sure. Let's do the same for our character and make sure that it is doing basically the same thing that the enemy is. We will just use the same flip horizontal property to do that. So back to my main character GD and also scene, so that I can actually get the information that I need. I will, after getting the export variables, I will get the onReady variable with the sprite. And now every time that I look left or look right, I need to swap this as well. Let me also put this for 40,000, which is basically my X velocity, in the proper place. I'll export it as speed, and the speed will be multiplied over here. Now, if I'm looking right, I want my sprite flip H to be false. And if I look left, I want it to be true. And with this, our character is able also to look to the place it's running to. And I still die to this this little guy. Wonderful. Now, last thing that we are going to do here in the video is to include score and live. So that's two things technically, but that's fine. Let's go back to our main scene over here and I'll also add the number of lives that I have left, and you could also interpret this as the number of hearts if you prefer a heart style, but in my case it will be more like a Mario style, in which every time that I hit something I die. Here in the same canvas layer, instead of showing this center container, I'll use the canvas layer to also show other GUI elements. Let's do this in a separate scene though. I'll open a control node, which will be our main GUI. I'll call this main GUI, just save it. Okay, and I'll just add some labels over here on the top left. So I'll put one single label which will contain the number of lives, say 5, and another label which will say lives. Of course, they are like now clipping on each other, so I'll actually add them into an HBox container. 5 lives. I'll actually do like this, lives : 5. And also notice that they are fairly small. I'll make this a little bit more visible. I'll say this one is just a label and this is the number of lives. Yeah, and this is lives. To make these things bigger, one of the ways that you can do is to change the theme and the font that you are actually using, and basically change then the size of the font. We are not going to do this now because this will have its own tutorial video. So for now, we will just use this small text. And back to my main scene, I can drag and drop my main GUI into the canvas layer. Now I can also see lives 5. If I run, I'll have lives 5 always in the top left corner. I'll also add something to make sure that I can always see this though. So hang on with me. So this is how it ended up looking at. Back to my spelling mistake, this is actually V, and sorry about that. What I'm doing here is using a panel. You can click plus and add a panel. Inside the panel, I added a margin container. Inside the margin container, there's the old HBox container that we had. I also made sure in the margin container to come here to layout full rect. And in the panel container is the one that I actually moved over here. Click on the panel container, I'll click here to make sure I'm just moving it. And I made sure it comes here. In the margin container, if you come here in the custom constraints, you can also add the margin so that there's a little margin between what it's inside and the outside of it. And also in the panel container, I came to custom styles and added a new style box flat. If you come here, you can change the background color to whatever you like. I just made a little darkish, somewhat transparent background. And I added a little border width to make this whitish border around it. I also added a border radius to make it sort of curly and not very squared. I could also change the border color, but I'll just leave it as white. With this, if I run my scene, you can see it's more visible now. Let's make it work by adding a script, create, and from the script, I can receive some call, say func reduce life maybe. And if I reduce my number of lives, I'll change the text inside this n lives. So to do that, let's first use the onReady once again. I'll also export the number of lives that we have. By default will be 5, but I can change this in the future. And once I'm ready, I'll just make sure that my text here is this value. Notice that I am associating a string with something that is not a string. You'll notice that there may be a problem in the future. And when I reduce my lives, my num lives will be reduced by 1. And I do this once again. So if I run, you'll notice that I can't actually set the text as an integer because this is a string and this is a string and this is an integer. So to change it and make sure I'm associating a string to it, there are several ways to do it. But this is the most reliable way, I believe. So now my lives is properly set from code. If I come over here, and if I don't die, okay, let me die. If I click on main GUI over here, you can see there's number of lives. If I change this, nothing will actually change here. I need to call this reduce life. So yeah, let's do that from code. Back to my main character, or say my main, when I call restart, I'll reduce the number of lives. So over here, I can already get I'll get my main GUI itself. And with this, and when you come here, you'll notice that there's a problem, because if I associate over here the main GUI and call the remove lives, nothing will actually happen because I just restarted my entire scene. So the fix to do this is instead of letting the main GUI control the number of lives, I will have an autoloader, which basically is a script that always runs outside the scene that is running. As an example, I'll just right click here, create a new script. I'll call this global, just for an example. So global will be my global script. To make this global script an autoloader, I can come here into project settings, auto load, and add it over here. Just find it, global, add, and now my global is configured as a singleton or an auto loader. Now if I just run as it is, I need to fix my code because I left something over there. If I run as it is here in remote, you'll notice that there's not just main here, there's also this global thing. This global is exactly this script that is running, and I have now access to it in all my scripts internally. So my global now will have this number of lives, which by default will be 5. And now from my main GUI, instead of storing the number of lives over here, I'll read from my global autoloader. And to do that, you just call global over here. That's all. And with this global, you'll access the global node. You may be asking why this global is lowercase and the other one is uppercase. Back here in the project settings, you notice that the name here is global. You can change this name to whatever you want, and you use this name in your project. So in my case, it's global with an uppercase. Back to my main GUI over here, I have the global num lives. I don't need this anymore. And when I change the number of lives, I'm actually changing this number of lives and setting this one. Now I'm able to actually reduce my life, even with the changing of the scene. So let's go back to my main where this is pressed. Before I change my scene, I will actually call the reduce life in the main GUI. I could also just call, maybe I'll do this actually, call global over here. Minus equals 1. Eventually I'll have many methods in the global method or global script, but for now a manual thing will do. So now if I die and click restart, my global lives go to 4 and to 3 and to obviously negative. Not exactly what we want, but now we have lives implemented. The last thing that I'll do is implement scores, which will basically be, if I kill an enemy, I'll get some score. I'll also show over here and store in the global variable. If I hit this, I get a little bit more score, and I'm able also to restart the level, or eventually we'll go to another level, but for now we'll just instantly, or not instantly, but after some time, wait for like 2 seconds, I'll restart the level. So let's go do that. First off, in the main GUI, instead of just having lives, I'll also have something else. Since I'm adding something to my margin container, I'll also add here a VBox so that I can store many things vertically, like this. In my second one, instead of this, I'll have score, and this will be my score, which starts as 0. Back in my global, I'll also store score, which will start as 0, and I actually don't need this reduce lives anymore, right? And in the ready, also make sure that the score label is updated to match the global score every time that I load. Maybe I can also do some update score here, just so I can update the score on the fly if I kill an enemy. So let's do the killing enemy first. Say my enemy, this enemy in specific, will have a score value of 100. So back here in my enemy, I will use this exact place where I kill the enemy and just say to my main script, someone killed me. So I'll delete this because I don't actually need it, create a signal of, I don't know, I was killed, death, maybe death, and I'll pass how much was the score that I actually need to add to the player who did this. So back here, I'll just emit the signal of death. I'll include my score. I could include other things, for example, even myself to check the attack or what else. I'll also actually add the area's parent. If you don't remember, the area is within the main character. So the parent of the area is my character. So like this, I just make sure that the signal will say, I'll even say myself, okay. So I died because of this guy. And I'll say enemy a character. So finally, back in my main script, on the enemy that I have over here, I can associate enemy death. I know the enemy, I know the character. What I'll do over here is just get the global dot score. Since I only have the global score, eventually this will be different so that I can handle multiplayer. So look forward to that. But for now, I'll just add to the score the enemy's score. I'll also make sure that I update my UI. So main GUI. I think that the name was different, right? I'll just say this updates the UI and I update everything just to make sure all is working fine. So like this, if I run and I kill the enemy, my score goes up. Let's do the same thing for the goalpost. And back here on my goal, instead of changing anything inside the goal, if you remember, I'm doing everything through my main scene about my goal. Come here to the node, I have the body entered. So this is what happens when I reach the goal. So when I do this, I'll just add this like a very large score, something like this. Say, I'll show the you win, and back in the you win, I'll add like a countdown to restart the level, which eventually will be to start the new next level. So now instead of just having the you win, I'll add something else. So once again, I'll add the VBox container. I'll call it you win. This will be the label of the you win, and I'll also add a label of a timer, which for now is like this. I'll add also an HBox container to be able to put multiple things together. The first thing will be restarting in, and the second one will actually be the number of seconds that I need to wait for the level to restart. So since this logic is a little bit more complex, instead of leaving it as part of the main scene, I'll create this branch as a new scene. So I just say uwin GUI will be my scene regarding uwin things. This will have a script once again. And with this script, what I'll do, I'll just remove everything that I don't actually need. And instead of using a timer, since we actually want to show the value in the screen using this label timer over here, I'll just say this is just a label because it doesn't matter. And since we want for this value to represent the exact thing that we are changing, we will create a value here which will contain exactly that time. So say time. It will start off being, I don't know, 5, and we'll change this time over time, making sure that this time also updates this label timer. So we'll do this using a set get. Set get. What is set get? Set get is the way that we use in Godot to make a setter or a getter. If you don't know this, basically means if every time that I set time, set this value whenever I want. First, I'll call a method, which I will say it's set time. And this method receives a value. And over here, I can give the value to time. But once I do this, I at the same time will change this label timer over here. So getting the label timer, getting the timer label or time label, I can also update it with a string value of the time. Something like this. So this way I can change the text of that label every time that I set this time. And how I'm actually going to set this time and change it over time. I'm going to use something different. We just use this timer node to do this timing function. However, the countdown timer doesn't actually inform us while this time is passing. Instead of this, we're going to use another node called tween. Tween is very good for animations, for example. And we're basically going to animate this variable over time. So tween. So with this tween, we can animate whenever, say I call a function trigger. I'll say tween, do something for me. If you go to the documentation of tween, feel free to read everything. What it basically do is interpolates things, being a property, or it could be also a method, could follow things. I won't go through the specifics, but what we are going to do is just basically what's written over here. And I just removed everything that I didn't want from this interpolate property. You can also check here in the documentation what it exactly does. As I was talking about, it uses an object, which will be myself, a property. You set the initial and final value, and also the duration that it will take. And there are some other properties that I actually don't want to change. So if I trigger this, call this in the trigger in ready, and I just run this little scene, you can see that the value animates and goes to 0. When it gets to 0, nothing happens. So what I'll do here in tween, I click tween completed and say once I complete my tween, I'll send a signal. Emit signal, completed. And this way my main script will be able to use this whenever it wants. So if I remove this, I need to call trigger from my main script and then wait for this signal to emit that it was completed. So let's go to my main scene once again. This uin starts out hidden. Once I make it show here, I call the trigger. And also I click here to make sure I override or look for when the signal is emitted. So when the uin is completed, I'll do a similar thing to a restart pressed, but without changing the number of lines. And that's all. With this, I'm able to kill the enemy, go over here, do this, I'm restarting sometime, and suddenly, boom, I start a new scene, and in this case, it's the same scene. This could be another scene, this could be the next level, for example. My score is just going up now. Try to not fall into your death if you come over here. Yay, now I managed to do both of them. So definitely we need to treat that as well. So let's do that. And to do that, I'll do a very simple fix. Here, when the fall is detected, I'll also check if the uin is being shown. If it is, I just don't actually do anything. I'll do things regarding the camera. but then I don't actually want to die. So instead of this death, I'll check is visible. So if I check if UN is visible, then I don't actually show this. So not. But I still will remove the camera so that my camera doesn't follow the character down. And since I'm already here, if I actually am in game over, I want to make my score 0. And in the near future, we'll actually store the score somewhere and make a little leaderboard with it. And I actually did this in the wrong place. What I want to do is over here. Okay, so now it should be what I expect. Come here and actually fall, you still go back with a new score, which is 1000. So it doesn't matter if you actually die after finishing the level. But now if you game over, you need to restart with 1 less life. And once I get to 0, my score will be 0. So I won't actually do this here. So basically what I'm doing now is once my number of lives gets to 0 when my restart is pressed, then my score just goes back to 0. And now that I am restarting my score once this restart is pressed, let's also create a leaderboard so that I can check what I've done in the past and how much score that I had in the past. So to store something, even though we'll still need to store it in a file eventually, let's first store the leaderboard in the global script by creating an array. So arrays are like this. Like this, you can define an array. An array can contain any number of variables inside, which can be of different types even. If you want a very specific array, there's also other types called pool something arrays, in case you don't know. But we'll just use this array type. We'll also include some methods to be able to add things and read things from the leaderboard just to be easier. So say func. Let's add a method to add a score to the leaderboard. So if I receive a new score, my leaderboard will be appended with this new score. For example, back in my main script, I can, when I do this, before resetting my score, I can also call new score. Or maybe I'll just do like this, so that the score will do everything for me. I'll reset my score after, and I'll also add my current score to the leaderboard. So something like this. This way my leaderboard will contain all the previous scores that happened. Now we'll have a variable storing what is the leaderboard in the past. I'll also just printed it out here just to show you guys how everything appears. I'll also go back to my character, or over here actually, and say I only have 1 life, just so I can do things faster. Say I have 100 points. Now I'll have 1100, and say I died, and I click restart. Now I'm back to 0, and back here on the print screen I can see that my leaderboard was updated with my previous score, which is 1100. Let's now also show that when I die, let's say show a little leaderboard on the right here. When I die, I want actually to show that as well. So what I'll do is on my main GUI, I'll add more things. Just so I have this here in the right, this panel on the right, I'll add a new panel called leaderboard. This leaderboard panel will be on the right. So something that I'll do is, instead of just moving things around, I'll first click in layout, clicking top right, it'll move to the top right, and I'll just move it back. The place this specific panel is anchored to is this corner instead of this corner. So this allows us to allow the screen to be stretched and contracted with more flexibility. So inside here, instead of having a bunch of things, we will do something else. Instead of having everything static as it is, inside my VBox container, I will add dynamically what are the leaderboard numbers when I actually read this update UI. So first, let's read the global.leaderboard. I'll do a for loop over here. And for each score, I'll add a child over this VBox container with that specific text. So let's do a onReady variable to store that location specific. So leaderboard VBox container is my leaderboard panel. And when I run the UI, I want to make sure my panel is first empty. So before this, I'll do for C in leaderboard.getChildren, leaderboard panel, remove children or remove child. Doing this, I can guarantee that every time that I update my UI, everything that is inside here is just eliminated. I'm just removing it from memory. And I now recreate it with the newer values. So now to recreate something, I need to first create a new label. So if we want to create a new label through code, this is the way. Our label will have a text, which will be the string of the score. And I also need to add this label as a child of my leaderboard panel. Nice. So if I run this as it is, nothing will be appearing here because there's no leaderboard at first. You see here to the right, if I die, my score was 0. If I die again, my next score is 0. Oh, I noticed a bug here. Notice that I now have -3 lives. I need to fix a little bug in my main script, back in script, where if my num lives happen, I want a new score, and I also want to reset my number of lives. So number of lives, say global. When new score runs, I want to reset the number of lives, which is by default. Just create a new variable here so that I can store what's my default number of variables, number of lives, and I will associate my number of lives to this. Just so I replace the number of lives that I have currently to the original one. So if I die, now I have 0 and my lives go back to 1. And now I again have 0. Let's kill him and then die. Now my next one is 100. And you notice that now my panel is not actually shrinking or changing sizes depending on what the labels are over here. So let's fix this. So in my main GUI over here, let's test out and add some labels. So if I have a label with say 1 and have a bunch of them, you notice that it's not actually stretching to properly fill the gap. What we need to do then is to make sure that the entire path, VBox container, margin container, and leaderboard panel stretches on the vertical axis to match what's the size of the children inside it. So first things first, here in the size flags, we want to expand vertically. This one we want to expand vertically, and this one we want to expand vertically. And finally, we also need to change the type of this panel to a panel controller, because the panel is a very bare bones structure. A panel controller is another node, which we can just right click here and say change type to panel controller. If you see, the panel controller is of type container, which is the same type of the margin container and VBox container. The container types handles well changing of the inner structure to properly match the size. panel control is the equivalent of panel, but with this functionality. So now we can see that if we delete things, and we actually need to refresh this to make sure it reloads, the proper size changes. So something like this. If we do this, it reloads and it's fine. So let's see how this is handled by our game. If we die and restart, now we have 0. If we kill someone and then die, restart, now we have 100. So now we have a very small, simple leaderboard over here, which is basically tracking my past scores, and that's all. Let's make this only appear when I die the final time. So when my main character dies the last time, I have a logic over here to verify if the number of lives is 0, and if that happens, I actually set the new score. So what I'm going to do is also in this new score is where I show that specific leaderboard panel from my GUI. So what I'm going to do is in my main GUI here, I also say show leaderboard. So this is a new method which I will create in my main GUI. Show leaderboard. If I want to show my leaderboard, I'll actually show this leaderboard panel. And I'll also make another one called hide. By default, this will be hidden, and I'll hide it again if I click the button. So back to my main script. If I click restart, I want to restart everything. I actually want to show it while the button is being shown as well to be pressed. So where do I actually show the button? Over here and over here. So you'll notice that there are two different places that I show the button and do different things. So I'll unite this in a separate function now. My handle death will do this. Will also show my leaderboard. And once my restart is pressed, I will hide my leaderboard. So now my leaderboard will only be shown when I'm also showing the game over screen. So I'll call this handle death over here, and I'll call the handle death over here. So now I can't actually see the leaderboard. Let's die, and now I can see the leaderboard. Notice that it's not yet filled in with my score, right? So let's also fill in the score in this screen instead of after clicking restart. And I also do this over here. So now my handle death will show the game over, will show the leaderboard, and will also update this. Let us just show the leaderboard after updating it though. And finally, of course, I also need to update my UI to make sure that the leaderboard is refreshed. So with this, everything should be working fine. So when I die, I already have my new score over here. I can restart, have a little bit more score, and suddenly everything is doing well. Let's do one final thing before saving this into a file. My leaderboard, I don't want it to be random, I want to be sorted. And to do the sorting, we will go to the array documentation, and you will see there is two different functions to do this, sort and sort custom. Sort is very good to sort strings, which will sort the strings as they are. However, notice that if you are using sort, it's sorted as an alphabetical order as opposed to natural order, which is not exactly what we want by our sorting scheme. We want actually to sort by number, and we want the highest number to be first, right? So we won't be able to actually use this sort. We will need to implement our own custom sort. So I'll just copy paste this example back to our code so that we remember what we're doing. Something like this. And what it's basically saying is that I need to call my items.sort custom, which will be here, but it's my leaderboard. And with my custom sorter over here, what the default function that we copied is doing is making sure that the left one is smaller than the right one, as you can see here. The left one is smaller than the right one, but this is not what we want. We want the reverse, right? We want the biggest one to be to the left. And also notice that here I'm using class with a static function. This doesn't need to be that complicated. So let me show you a very simpler way to do. If I just do Shift Tab to move it back, I had now this sort ascending, and I can just put self over here. So like this, it gets a little bit simpler to see and to understand. If I run now and say I die, there's 0, and now I have 100 and I die again, you'll notice that the basic thing that is happening is also wrong, because what I'm checking here is the first value of the value inside the array, but the array only has integers, right? There's no such thing as the first, the position 0 of the integer. So we actually don't need this. Let's fix this pretty fast and run it again. Let's die. Let's get some scores, and now everything is working as we expected. So what I just showed you is like a debugging procedure and also learning procedure that I myself do. I try things out, I notice that there are problems, I go back, read what I just did, and make sure that the logic is conforming whatever I was planning on in the first place. So the next thing that I'll do is, instead of just every time that I run the game, this gets reset, I want actually to be saved somewhere. To do this, we will use the saving procedure that Godot allows us to have. If you come to the Godot documentation, I'll also link this in the description below, you can see how to save games. In this case here, I'm trying to save a game with several JSON-like or dictionary-like information. And if you read through the save game and load game code, what it's basically doing is creating a file, getting whatever information is within the structure that I want to save, and storing into that file something as a JSON, something like this. So we are going to do a very similar thing in our code. And with this, we have the solution, which you may try to copy paste from my code or also get from the description in GitHub. So in my save procedure, where I'll always call if I have a new score, I will create a new dictionary, which I prefer dictionaries to use while saving things, because we always can change from into JSON, which is also a dictionary-like structure, but in a text form. It's just a text with a dictionary within. And we set up a simple key called Leaderboard, storing our current leaderboard. We open the file in the write state, and we store that specific line to the save file. Notice that we are also saving it to the user path. We can also save it to res, which is exactly this path over here. So you can prefer either one. Res, maybe it's best to use when developing, just so everything is within the same project that we're working with. User is the best for your eventual production game or application, mostly because this will be sure to store in the user's file system somewhere, say app data or other places. We may try to find exactly where depending on the system by searching Google. And to load the save, which I always do on ready, so every time this global script is loaded, I load my save. I check if the file exists, and if it does, I open it in the read state. I read one line, parsing from JSON, so it's in the inverse of the to JSON. And from here, I just get the leaderboard that is saved in the first place. So with this, you can already see that I already have some scores stored over here. Notice that there's still one more problem, because if I keep dying, my score will go to infinity and go below the screen. So what I'll do is just make sure I'm only showing a few of the scores, not all of them. So what I'll do is back here, instead of showing all the scores of the leaderboard, I'll only show some of them. So what I'll do is I'll get the minimum value among the size of the leaderboard, and say the maximum number of values I want to show are 10, I don't know. And from here, I'll just do range 10, range this thing, in case you don't know what range does, because I don't think I explained it yet. The range is a very good function to be used within Godot to do lists, like very simple lists. In this case, a range of a number will give me the list of numbers from 0 until that number minus 1. So if this is 10, this will give me a list of 0 to 9. So this 4 will execute with scores from 0 to 9. It's very similar to the Python range, in case you know how to program Python. So back here, instead of my score being this will be actually I and my score. I'll retrieve it from my leaderboard like this. And I don't think I can do this because Godot doesn't know what type it is. Wonderful. So now I have a score, and I'm limiting whatever I show to the top 20. So now, no matter how many scores that I have, I'll only show, not 20, right? 10. So always only show 10 maximum. And now here we go. We have our full implementation that we were planning for this video. We managed to get lives, we managed to get scores, we managed to get proper leaderboard set up, and even we managed to get the enemy walking about. So let's make the level a little bit more interesting and make some levels to finish off this video. Let's go back to my main scene, and let's fast forward to whatever I do here. I'll also add some other levels, as we'll see on the next fast forward. And I'll also add in my level, notice that I changed the name here to level, main to level. I'll also add an export variable here with the name of the next level. Now from my first level, I can just come here and say here whatever level that I want. Say this one is level 2 and the other one will be by default level 1. So if I start from my level 1, we'll make sure this one is my main scene once again because I just changed it. Set as main scene. After I finish this level, I should go to the next level. And here I am in the next level. And I noticed that there is a bug here in which I believe an enemy finished for me. So we need still to check over there. And now I died with a lot of points. So let's just fix this bug where the restart doesn't work, and also where the enemy can finish the level for us. And to solve these problems, what I have done is I came to my goal scene over here, and I made sure to change the collision from the third one to the fourth one. And also in my main character, I did basically the same. I added the fourth one so that my character can collide with the goal scene as well. So this way, my enemy, which doesn't have the fourth layer or mask, will not collide with my goal post. The second issue, which was regarding my restart, I solved like this. Notice that I'm doing after the fact because I lost some footage. Here in my restart, I made sure to change here from main, so this string was wrong, and change it back to level 1 so it matches what my scene name is. And to finish all off, something else that I noticed while testing was that if I run the game, when I died, if I had some score like this and I died, the score would become 0. So I changed some things, little things, to make sure that this score actually stood as a number until I clicked restart. So I created this this function in my global script called reset score, which basically makes the score go back to 0. And this score was over here before, so I just removed it so that new score won't actually change my score. And now I call the reset score when I click restart. And to finish all off, I also added this check when I hit the goalpost and I die after the fact because I'm an enemy. This method was being called like this. So it was like this before. So in this case, what I was seeing is basically this. I would see both you win and you lose screens at the same time if I'm fast enough, like this, which is not what I want. I actually only want to show you win. Anything else that I do after I win doesn't matter. Or maybe if I kill the enemy, I get some points, but that's fine. So I added this check, which is the same check that I was doing over here, which is when I die falling from a pit. With this check now in place, I can finish my game and die to an enemy, and I have no issues, as you can see. Well, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit the like button below. And sorry for the length of this video. I know it was a little bit longer than before. I do intend to do shorter videos from now on, but I wanted to pass over these basic stuff a little bit faster than other YouTube videos, especially because it's been treated before and now I have the basis to do some more interesting things, more advanced things. So I hope you guys stick with me and enjoy the next videos that are upcoming, more intermediate style level. See you next time.